All right, let's kick it off. Let's dive into les charts. Hopefully, some of you have done some work, and it depends on what you're doing. If you're really trading this week, or if you're more so, absorbing everything you can from me. Hopefully, you've done some self prep. Hopefully, you've had some check-ins. You understand where you're at right now, and you're ready to come to the table with your weaknesses and your process goals and the things that you're looking forward to doing, and that you've redefined what it means to win today for you. Very important. Okay, crude oil. Let's do a little something here. What if we did a little doc? Yearly. Very top left. What do we think about the yearly? Balanced up. No, don't correct that. It's imbalanced. No. But very extended. Right? The read is mostly bearish, but not very usable. Quarterly. New quarter, so no DVA. We are balanced up, imbalanced, balanced. Is there a way I can add that to the definition or define it? Whatever. Up relative to its prior value. Not really usable. And we're talking about not usable. We're talking about for today, right? Like, how am I going to lean on the fact that we're above quarterly prior value area by what? $9, right? I can't say, well, I should be long or I should be short the next 3-minute bar based on that stuff. Can't do it. Monthly. Balanced up. Now I can do it. Let's adjust this level on the month. Right. Bullish for sure. That goes into our bias here. Weekly, starting to get down to the smaller time frames here. Weekly's at an interesting spot here today. Zoom into it. Here is that age-old thing that we were talking about yesterday, to where do you quickly change your definition around what's bullish or bearish or whatnot based on small little micro type movement, or do you stay focused on the big ebbs and flows, the rhythm on the time frame? Most of the time, we want to focus on that rhythm, acceptance-based read. So this is bullish, right? It's still imbalanced up. It's a fresh imbalance up. It's brand new, right? What all week long, we've been saying lower extreme, upper extreme, lower extreme, upper extreme, lower extreme, upper extreme into yesterday, where we were saying, okay, the trade's done after inventories, target achieved. Well, guess what? Hey, let's get imbalanced. So now the weekly's kind of taken over here. So one thing that might happen is that crude oil, this is kind of a non-Nadro comment, but let's just look at this daily bar chart. You know, it might could finally capitulate. You see sometimes markets that get parabolic, right? So it'll be a curve. Right? It'll be something like this, right? This pattern. And it just gets really, really steep at the end. So maybe some type of blow off, we get really steep. So when I think of this daily chart getting steeper, what are some things that might happen different than we've been seeing? Well, guess what? We've been steep on the daily and rotational all week. So what if the weekly gets imbalanced up? What if the weekly starts pushing a fast trend and whatnot? Well, guess what? That's going to put us into even more extreme slope, you know, on the daily. So long story short, weekly's now imbalanced up. Full rejection of its prior value as well. Bullish. Yesterday, as we know, we had a breakout of our most recent, really you could call it kind of a you know, almost a three, it's a 3.5 day, right? We had 1, 2, 3. It's well, really you had 1 and a 3/4 of a day, and then half of a day, and then 30% of a day, right? So whatever. Okay, we've broken out of a CVA that includes multiple pieces of multiple days. So above that area is bullish. We can adjust that color to be bullish. Any key profile features, you know, things like that to look out for? Not really, other than perhaps adding in almost like a secondary CVA, right? Because not only do we have this, which is the main thing, we do have this. So we might include this to like this. Let's just maybe just keep our daily TPO chart with those little highlights on it, just to remind us throughout the day, in case we don't really go anywhere, the weekly doesn't get imbalanced, can't stay imbalanced. Let's remind ourselves that this is pretty much a distribution up here, and there could be a short scalp, and this works out. What my eyes just did that you guys could never know if I didn't tell you is that I'm looking at this daily TPO chart, okay? I looked at what if we broke down below that area. What would that look like on my other two charts that I care about, which is weekly and monthly? If we broke this down, that means we've broken down the weekly. Let me just draw instead of use my mouse. So if we break this down, that means we've broken down the weekly, okay? And is it a concern if we were maybe thinking of a short scenario here around 82.40s? No, it's not, because here's 82.40s, and I need my global crosshair. Sorry. Monthly development value high is 81.80. So pretty much by the time monthly maybe keeps ticking up, it's going to be right at the top level of this of the CVA. So this trade, this short scalp idea would work. It would make sense on this time frame, and structurally it would make sense, and on this time frame. We don't care about this. We don't care about this. This is for intraday use. This is for intraday use. This is for just a conglomerate of all of it. Right? So we've used everything. Everything's fine for that. Got to think through scenarios. A lot of times I teach people to do long-term VWAP analysis, long-term VWAP summary, and then we'll do structural narrative. Let's use the word narrative. Structural narrative. Yesterday, day one break of quasi high, bullish. Note quasi CVA structure above actual CVA. Is that not how you spell quasi? Q-U-A-S-I. Oh, quasi. Structural summary is, I mean, we almost don't even need to write that again because I'm just going to write the same thing. We could add that scenario though, kind of if remain more choppy, could foresee trading in and around both balance areas. Let's bypass. Overall summary. Bullish market with fresh on weekly in continued balanced states across most all timeframes, including fresh breakout of CVA, right? Market's very bullish. Hypos. One, let's think about it. One is just going with the imbalance on the weekly here, right? We're a long ways away from our main CVA level. We're just going to be aware of this upper balance that we've seen, but by no means is that area nearly as important as the actual CVA that we've built. So the first thing to do is to say, well, the monthly may not pull all the way back because we may be starting to accelerate, right? So the weekly is trying to get imbalanced up. Number one hypo is going to be what's kind of staring us in the face right here as this market goes rotational, by the way, you know, ETH. weekly imbalance pullback long. I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, targets the weekly +2 and or monthly +2. Hypo 2. What if for me, Hypo 2, I think, is going to be the scalp short opportunity, which just would come sequentially before Hypo 3. Hypo 3 would be if we pull all the way back and the monthly needs to, the monthly imbalance pullback plus the breakout pullback of the CVA, since they're going to be pretty confluent there. But in between there is that scenario we talked about where we actually break this small upper distribution we're focused on. Well, not focused on, but aware of, which would be short scalp after failed weekly imbalance pullback, breakout pullback of upper balance area, scalp into Hypo 3 area, right? We're going to scalp that into the monthly imbalance pullback lower, the breakout pullback, CVA level there. Sorry, I've been typing on a different screen. Long-term VWAP summary. Sorry, we skipped it. It's pretty clear. Bullish as monthly and weekly balanced up. Now, today we have enough room to kind of have our hypos to where essentially the long-term VWAP summary never changed, right? Let's do an extra thinking here. What might happen if we really get going to the downside? Let's keep in mind the yearly is really extended. The quarterly doesn't provide any support for a very long time, right? Maybe when the weekly imbalance fails, sure, we get our short scalp, but then maybe Hypo 3 fails where we can't hold this level. Well, the fourth thing that could happen would be a return pullback. Right? I just typed return pullback short, composite value high. The fifth thing that could happen would be, let's look at it, but it's a breakout pullback lower. Guess what? That's where we're going to start to begin to define, see if we broke out below, let's say we went to yesterday's low. We're getting close to halfway to VWAP on the monthly, right? So we're going imbalance down on the weekly perhaps, right? So the sky is falling would be breakout pullback below CVA, monthly failed imbalance, or monthly, yeah, let's leave it at that. Monthly failed imbalance pullback, right? Going rotational. Weekly getting IB down, imbalance down. Right? So that would be, and you could come up with a dozen hypos, guys. You really could. It depending on how far and how crazy you want to account for things potentially being, right? 3 is usually pretty good. You can always come in and think through that when you need to, right? If things really start to break down, don't trade it. Just trade it like the price action. Go create a hypo and go read the narrative and understand how it's unfolding. So 7 minutes until we open in crude. We can definitely stalk, long on an extreme fade on the ETH chart. I'm not going to lie. I'm a little afraid of the open based on what happened yesterday. All right, quickly as we kind of sit back and probably going to wait for the open, let's analyze the S&P. Not going to do another typed out thing. It just takes a lot of time while I'm trying to narrate all this and do it. But this is the way you want to do it, guys. You want to have a written, view of what you could see on this time frame, what you could see on this time frame, what you could possibly envision unfolding. That way, as a part of your review process. In fact, let's try to do that today. Let's try to go back and look at this, at the end of the day, together for the review meeting, and let's see how we did. Right. Always be able to read, have something tangible to refer to get a read on how good is my read on narrative. How good am I able to identify narrative? It's one of the keys of NADRO. It starts with an N. It all starts with narrative. All right, the S&P has been going in a straight line for a while. Looking back through history, how far is the S&P able to go in a straight line before it corrects? Right? What's the rhythm on the yearly under, let's call it, normal conditions? Right? So we start to get a little antsy about, we're not just bullish because this is imbalanced. We're bullish, when we're near the level of invalidation. That's where the most risk reward is. As we get further and further away from it, we become less and less bullish. So anyways, yearly, not much to see there. We could either go to the +2, we could revert. Who knows? We have to look at the lower time frames to see where the clues are as we start to do some of those things. Quarterly, we're definitely bullish, just like yesterday, above prior value. Quarterly, we are bullish above prior value. It would be a beautiful trade if, here over the next few days or week, we get some type of a pullback, and that developing value, which I know we're not using, but we just don't use both the quarterly and the monthly developing value, right? Otherwise, we'd say, oh, look, quarterly developing value high is at this price level. Oh, look, the monthly developing value area high is confluent. No, they're the same thing, right? So we don't use both, but it's not like we can't look at this and read it. Just don't call it confluence or allow it to subconsciously affect your mind to thinking, I've got more things going here, when in reality, you only have one thing because it's just one thing. But definitely excited about that, even if not today, right? Thinking in the future, that's a good trade. Let's pull back to this to give a little breakout pullback. And we're probably going to have DVA up there as well for a nice setup. So at some point, we'll look for that. Let's adjust our monthly development value area for the DMI chart. So notice the monthly is, it's really holding a fast trend, right? And I would reiterate what I've said before, which is that's difficult to sustain, my friends. Look at how once we got, typically what you see is we get up to the +2. We pull back here. We get up to the, the +2, pull back. Maybe if it really wants to get fast, it does more things like this where it pulls to the 1.5 and can go. But I mean, we've really kind of held the 2. This was somewhere in between 1.5 and 2. We're currently just stabilizing and holding them here at the 2. This almost did there. So this is very, very fast, and it's very unsustainable. It's very unsustainable, but we'll continue to go with what is until proven otherwise. But we can be cautious. We can be more cautious. Sometimes we can be more cautious at times than other times. I don't know how to say that. Sometimes we can swing away with reckless abandon while minding our risk management, of course. And sometimes we have to say, oof, I can go with a long trade here today, but I'm not going to overstay my welcome. I'm going to be a little cautious about leaving that core position on and being that negligent babysitter that we talked about. I'm going to watch this thing. If it doesn't look good, I'm not going to sit around. About 40 seconds till crude open. It's getting a little bounce. Don't really care. Let's see what the open brings. If we can get kind of a stop run through here. Kind of poor lows. Let me change this chart real quick. If you want to see how to get those overnight sessions, I saw there was a conversation yesterday. Let's do it. 8 to 13:29. Let's use evening session from 13:30 to 07:59:59. And then let's go to our TPO settings. Oh, what a horrible time to do this, Merritt. Exclude that evening session except for the last. So there's that poor low. You can see it on the profile there too. So as I kind of stalk long here, seeing how it shakes out, I'm half stalking here, but mostly stalking. You think I'm concerned that we start to dip below this green level that I have for the weekly imbalance pullback? No. I think that we can be very loose with that framework, right? As hopefully this week is teaching you guys, we can be loose with that, not overly precise, not micro with that read. We've got a big long rotation on the weekly that's coming into this level. We can be loose with it, and we can hold that in our mind while we allow for maybe some other shorter term things to happen, like a stop run lower, like a DVA level getting filled, so to speak, right? Because the market kind of needs to get those done because so many algorithms or whatever are using it. So one thing I noted earlier, when I glanced at the ETH chart, you can see that the sellers were drying up, right? Coming into, you know, the session, you see how we're putting in a nice down leg rotation, right? But where's that selling here, right? It's just, you know, very, very sideways. So sellers not really strong. Buying kind of taking control of the tape after a down move. That's what we like to see to kind of stalk a long opportunity. As I mentioned, that overnight lows area vulnerable to a stop run. So if we did get long here, we'd be a little cautious. And cognizant of that. Where did we get in our ES prep? Monthly, I think, is where we were. We'll keep an eye on CL. Monthly, very extended, holding the +2. We're at 2 bullish levels. Again, S&P is still kind of in a space where you got bull level, then a bull level, then a bull level, then a bull level, with no real clarity on which one of those is crucial. Let's delete this overnight balance from yesterday. I've pretty much, you know, said, well, I'm not taking that, you know, crude trade right there. If I do end up getting into it, it's probably going to be some kind of second chance thing. If it really starts to work, I might use a smaller time frame thing on the RTH to kind of get involved. It was just on the 3-minute chart, it was a little difficult to play, right? In fact, we're, you know, still 30 seconds out from this 3-minute bar closing. Just because the wide ranginess of the open, and look at all this bar to bar overlap and consolidation that's occurred in this area, right? I feel like I'm able to be very aggressive and whatnot when there's nice momentum. Down bar, down bar, down bar, down bar, down bar, doji, up bar, up bar, up bar, up bar. But when you get a lot of bar to bar overlap, I start to get gun shy about putting entries on. Not only that, look at the DMI chart, top, center, left. Look at where we're at, right? It's a big mess right here. So I still like the trades, don't get me wrong, but I get more gun shy about putting on an aggressive entry. It's a good trade, don't get me wrong. If you guys are in it, good for you. So this would be the entry, because the 3-minute closed. Back to the ES. Monthly. I mean, we could absolutely get that. It's not that far away, right? Yeah. I mean that. Oh no, I was talking about the quarterly. That's fairly far. But the monthly prior value we could see today. But anyways, we got a problem, right? Just like NASDAQ yesterday. We're not really holding an imbalance anymore on the week. right? What is the read for the week? I'm going to go time acceptance here. I am going to go bearish, right? Look at, like, I know we didn't get quite the depth, we didn't get quite halfway to VWAP or anything like that, but we have put in this entire kind of, you know, entire Asian session, European session, including a little wick higher here. So let's see if that area holds and that excess holds. We could probably look at an overnight profile, right? The overnight profile shows that wick right there. So yesterday's value high and that overnight wick up into that area, is kind of a line in the sand, which coincides with the weekly. It's what it's all about. It's why it's there, right? Crude, we missed the boat. It worked out pretty perfectly. So we'll see about working a secondary entry to get involved there. So S&P, a little general bullishness and a little immediate bearishness. That's how I would describe it, right? Let's do a quick and dirty on the NASDAQ. I'm not going to try and teach as I do the prep. I just want to quickly do it for myself. And actually going to make this a little bearish. Quarterly prior value high. All this is good. On the monthly, weekly's the same as yesterday. Haven't been able to get up there and retest that weekly developing value high. That would be nice if we could. This is probably a merge, right? Letters, blocks, and a column. It's not a great one. It's probably a perfectly fine distribution. Yeah, and it gives us something updated versus that old one. Very different picture than the gap up in the S&P, right? Remember we had that NQ weakness yesterday. So we are currently in kind of breakout pullback to the downside mode. That's what's capping us, guys. We're saying, hey, why isn't NASDAQ going up and getting this extreme fade for the week as would be normal? We've been unable to pull back and get up there. Why is that? The 2-day balance value area, the composite value low is what during this overnight session, we've been unable to poke into and hold. We keep finding sellers there. So NASDAQ, you could potentially just continue to fade that upper extreme. I think the more times we knock on that door, the more times the full weekly extreme fade becomes viable. If we go imbalance down in NASDAQ, I think that's just a good imbalance down to get involved with up until we start to run into the imbalance pullback for the month, right? So I like stalking short in the S&P as kind of a hypo one, going with the failed imbalance, recent condition shift, immediate reference. Other time frames are bullish, but not confluent, not immediately staring us in the face saying this is a bull line in the sand. They're just kind of bullish in general, but at extremes that are which we're saying is kind of a ticking time bomb for a pullback. So 17 minutes until the open still in the S&P. Not that I won't trade at pre-market, but yeah, I mean, I'll probably short anything that moves up here as long as it looks good. CL with some decent selling there. It's back to delta neutral RTH. Nothing's changed really in terms of where we are in terms of yesterday. So we got to the edge of yesterday's single prints for the pit session. That's where we've been capped not all night, but a lot of the recent overnight has been capped because we tried the breakout pullback of this upper distribution, let's call it, right? We failed. We zipped all the way, there's the return pullback of this distribution. We zipped all the way across it. And so we're rotational inside this upper distribution. So pit session, what do? We go test the lower edge, we go test the upper edge, and now we're finding more selling. And that's the strongest order flow we've seen right now. So that's, I narrated that a little bit earlier. When I went up, I said, just go look at the DMI chart. I said, look at where we are with all of that, right? So that's the same type of analysis. You can use price action, you can use distributions, but it's important that I put the context of that consolidation within the context of the upper distribution that we've seen for, 3 days. If we wait in crude to get essentially, let's call it a breakout pullback of the upper distribution, right? The upper structural area, the upper edge of this little most recent overnight balance. There's still, if we can get that trade location, look at where that is on the weekly, 83.12 kind of. That's just barely starting this potential move that we see on the weekly, right? It's not in, it doesn't get us into trouble in terms of that thing I've been talking about all week. How's my trade location, right? Another way of asking that is, how's the risk reward? What am I running into trouble here? Am I getting extended away from the good line in the sand, or am I not? Am I fine? In this case, we'd be fine doing that. So I don't feel a tremendous sense of urgency to get involved in this choppy sequence here, right? Do you see, you know, you don't even see rotations here in the past almost hour, right? A bit of a down one here, but even within the down one, look at how far up and down it's going inside of that. So pretty tough here. I will say, however, if you look at the RTH chart, the volume bars since we've opened, that looks much prettier, doesn't it? Down, up, down, pretty clean. So I've had my eye on that. I'm just pointing it out to you guys now. NASDAQ. Gold. What does gold look like? Gold kind of trying to, I'm just going to make this neutral because it's trying to put in a little time acceptance IB up for the month. Weekly still bearish. Getting into some NASDAQ short here. I know it's a, and that in fact, that's a teaching lesson. So, you know, I'm getting short essentially into VWAP here. So you say, well, you know, we're supposed to short from developing value high. I look at rotations, right? So I see this as a rotation, which was essentially to developing value high, right? I know it was a little shy of it. And that's where we get a momentum shift. Won't give this much more room because if it can't get through VWAP there and is finding some buyers, then we can probably get a better short trade location higher. Tight stop on this. Oh, I'm out of NASDAQ. Little stop there. Definitely, you know, probably was it 0.4 R there. So not like taking that disadvantaged, spot and losing 1 R. Kind of like I'm kind of liking crude, maybe a little spring pattern here. It's lower extreme of RTH. It's lower extreme-ish of ETH. And of course, it's our hypo 1, right? That we're still looking at. Working into a little bit of the crude. I'll get in more if it gets a little bit higher, or I'll just not if it's going to go lower. Yeah, we're going to stand aside in crude. Lost half of an R there. S&P and NASDAQ still ticking higher. Still viewing those as into bearish areas. So still stalking long crude, still stalking short NASDAQ. tough to stalk trades and execute in multiple markets. Don't suggest it for everybody. Not that I'm some superhuman to do it. It's just while you're, again, that conversation we've been having where you're coming up the curve, you're trying to be consistent, you're trying to do the right things, use your checklists, make sure that you're not doing stupid things. Well, guess what? Trying to do two things at once, trying to do 10 things at once in two markets, right, is not going to end well. Equities open, NASDAQ running up higher a bit. Crude still pressing lower, a lot lower. Shorted a little NASDAQ. Just a little stop run above the overnight, kind of area. Peel some off. Into VWAP there. NASDAQ, it's fast and furious. I know we're missing the bounce in the crude now, but I didn't have the bandwidth to go do those things. It's 2 minutes into the equities open and I'm trading NASDAQ, right? That's you need to have your eyes on that. So we'll see what we can do with crude. So now, the NASDAQ trade is like, well, we got a really good trade location there. We got a great move away from our entry immediately. We got some partial profits taken into VWAP. Let's see if we get more of the narrative playing out here, or get stopped on the rest. S&P trying to go higher, NASDAQ trying to go higher. Just some opening volatility. See these couple 3-minute bars here. Just feeling it out. Still stalking long in crude. Strong selling in crude, right? So being a little careful, waiting for a little more confirmation. Okay, we're in some crude right there. Long, of course. NASDAQ still not really doing much. If these excess highs can hold, then we'll be able to stay in a position. If not, we won't. About, yep, stopped out of the rest of NASDAQ. Scratch there. Got some on the scale and pretty much erased that on the stop on the remainder. Stopped on crude. Re-entered crude. Busy, busy. Re-entered NASDAQ short. Crude is stalling. Crude is not, we're not getting a move. Like, if you look at this, this entry I'm trying here essentially, right? Tried it again. still just holding this kind of flag pattern. It's a great trade location, you know, with these DVAs and whatnot. NASDAQ entries underwater. We're giving it a real stop there. Come and get me. There it goes. Yes, it's probably the easiest trade today. Well, we haven't participated. It's okay. Crude barely hanging on. NASDAQ barely hanging on. NASDAQ looking like it's about to stop us out. Stopped out of crude. And stopped out of NASDAQ. All right, so I'm going to take a break here. So I've got, you know, I'm down almost 2R in crude. I'm down right at just over 2R in NASDAQ. So down 4R on the session here. That's not a good start to a session. So need to take a break just to kind of, you know, regroup, allow myself to clear my mind, because I do feel a little like out of sorts, a little out of balance right now. So grab a cup of coffee here, you know, just not think about markets or trading for a second. I'll be right back. We'll come back and we'll kind of assess where we're at, where the opportunities are, and go for, you know, I'll probably give myself another 2R. Another 2R would be daily loss limit. So all good. We all have sessions that go daily loss limit. So we might be in for one here today, but I'll be back in just a moment. I'm back. Okay, so let's kind of thumb through some markets here and see what's going on. So S&P, remember the view on S&P is kind of immediately bearish, higher time frame, bigger picture bullish. That all changes and kind of hinges on weekly with prior value low. So as we drill down to like the ETH chart here, looking at the order flow, we're kind of at delta neutral. We could easily wick that right now, attempting to push up through it. So the S&P could be at a short trade location for us. Depending on the tape and the momentum and the rhythm and whatnot. Crude has pretty clearly, I guess, at this point, let's get rid of some of this. Failed to remain imbalanced up on the weekly. So it hasn't gone through what we're calling this lower upper distribution, hasn't broken through the downside of that quite yet. It's only gone and ran stops and whatnot below there. So it'll be interesting to watch if we can get, that scenario that we talked about where we break this down, the weekly's no longer imbalanced up, and we can traverse down to our next bullish area, which is the composite area, monthly development value down here at 8190s. Sellers have been just very much in control of pretty much just one long leg. It gave us some little flaggy opportunities on the volume based chart there to get involved. That was a really nice spot to do so. And it's probed lower here. So we'll monitor that order flow situation. We'll monitor if let's say the bulls come in really strongly here and we retake that area, we may give ourselves another opportunity to go for that main hypo, that long scenario again. But if they don't, then we start to go down the list in terms of those alternate scenarios as we work lower. Right now, it's just kind of in a bit of a limbo state to where I wouldn't want to stalk imbalance pullback shorts right now. I'd want to see it get a little lower and then stalk shorts. And I definitely don't just want to buy here based on the weekly kind of falling apart here. Now, if it ends up being a wick, right? If we just snap back and let's look at this chart in detail, right? Let's say that we just snap back through here and this is just a nasty wick to VWAP. Oh, well, we got caught up in it earlier. It happens. But similar to, I can't really remember a trade from yesterday to where, well, it was crude, right? It was crude. It was crude on the monthly. The way we were dipping below and wicking below, but it ended up being nothing, right? This is something, but if we do snap back, that trade will be on again. Let's look at the NASDAQ. What do we think about that? Yeah, really. So our earlier trades in the NASDAQ were fading the upper extreme of ETH and RTH DVA and leaning on a 2-day composite value low. That has failed. We've now accepted into that 2-day CVA, right? So we'd have a little bullish area here for now. And we have the upper edge of that CV. I'm just doing this instead of like a DMI chart. Upper edge of that is there. And then the monthly is also right there. So that's where this market's trying to get to. I said monthly, I should have said weekly. I'm sorry. We are bullish in Q with a nice target area, a very nice target area. So if we could actually get, if I wouldn't have been on a break, perhaps I would see that RTH imbalance pullback right there and take it as a long. ETH could still very easily give some type of imbalance pullback to get long. Now, I do see it as more of a scalp long, right? I am thinking another step ahead. I am interested in the short from up there. So if we get up there, kind of wick this area, show signs on probably RTH first, ETH second of going rotational, I'm going to be hammering that short. We'll monitor order flow. Order flows, obviously, bulls are in control now, contextually and short term. So that's where we're at with everything. Nothing really to stalk at the moment, other than potentially scalp long NASDAQ. Got some fresh coffee. Stepped outside, looked at the leaves starting to change colors, just barely starting to hint at it. And I apologize, I have not been able to keep up with the chat today, guys. Every single thing in the chat is a question. Question. A nice little nugget from Zero. Question. So obviously I'm not going to be able to answer those kind of questions, guys, when I'm stalking trades in multiple markets. We'll if they were important and you really want them answered, we'll get to them on the Q&A session at noon Central. That'd be an aggressive entry here on the break of this little flag on the RTH. Not going to do that with my limited, bullets remaining in terms of risk for the session. Would have been a loss anyways. I will never go back to non-nut butter Cliff Bars. Once you've gone to the nut butter side of Cliff Bar, there's no other Cliff Bar that's worth ingesting. The risk of the RTH imbalance pullback here is the rhythm on the 3-minute and the ETH, right? It could and under normal situations needs to pull back a little further. And in fact, based on the amount of selling we're seeing, we will pass on the more aggressive RTH, looking for more straight line, fast trend movement on the ETH. Let's let the ETH pull back in here. Go with more standard trades. Crude, you dirty dog. Look at this weekly. All the way to VWAP to potentially remain imbalanced up. That's dirty. Good trade, Ilamon. A little late on the call out, but I was just thinking that myself about that's a good play there. Couldn't get through that structural area. You're being very lenient with the overall read and shift in condition on the weekly, but certainly something I would consider if I was in a more risk-seeking state now, and my account was had a little more money in it on the session today. Certainly a nice, aggressive play if that's what we're looking for. NQ looks like it just did something in between an ETH and an RTH imbalance pullback. I was looking for more time, more bars in terms of rhythm on the ETH, right? Give me 3-4 bars to the downside, and then let's see it turn. Maybe not getting it. Well, right here in crude on the weekly, you may see some sellers defend this, technically weekly developing value area high level. Certainly something that could be seen. If for those of you who got long the extreme fade, you really wanted to have scaled into VWAP there and RTH developing value area high, like you need to respect the dangerousness of what's going on with the in limbo kind of state on the weekly, to where by all intents and purposes, it's really trying to maintain imbalanced up. But let's be honest, it went all the way to VWAP and now it's back up at development value area high. We could see some sellers there for sure. NASDAQ so far holding delta neutral from above. Now, another order flow comment around NASDAQ right now is that, yes, we held delta neutral into the low of this, small down rotation. But on a more granular level, how much buying have we seen off that low? And the answer would be zero. Not the aggressive buying that we had been seeing. So perhaps due for something of a complex correction here, which could be nice. It could give us an entry. We've got a poor high now on the profile. Clearly, we could traverse prior value. Clearly, we can traverse the CVA, get to that upper extreme. Clearly, we have a little more room to get to weekly development value area high. So would like a long entry in NASDAQ. CL's not, not changing. Although now that you mention it and I kind of look at it freshly, what does this start to look like? It starts to look like a time acceptance. It looks like a time acceptance failure, right? A time acceptance rotational state now. That's what crude looks like to me. Let's go bear. Everybody see that? Let's draw the rhythm, right? So we've got this flaggy, essentially, right? Flaggy pattern, unable to stay imbalanced up there. So I'm gonna shift the context there. NASDAQ way up towards that destination. Disappointing. I was hoping to get involved in that. I'm not gonna let it frustrate me, not gonna chase, not gonna do things that I shouldn't. Let me just put this here too. Usually I don't update DMI type stuff on the fly like that. So I'm just going to remind myself there that we started out the day bullish from that area. Remember our one of our lower scenarios, just to reiterate it, in crude would be breaking down, below this overnight balance, below this upper 3-day distribution, the weekly having failed as we've now defined it to stay imbalanced up, and going for that lower composite value high, right? And the monthly development value high. So right now, 8190s is kind of where we think crude is trying to get to. That's our read on the narrative and whatnot. But we're still rotational, ETH and RTH. We haven't quite broken down any of the structural stuff yet to give us that trade. So we need to push down, get a pullback to short it for that destination. Now, as we get higher and higher in NASDAQ, we're going to potentially begin shifting from trying to get involved in this imbalance up, right, to then beginning to stalk short. Granted, we're not going to just fade the imbalance up on these time frames, right? We're going to wait for it to set up. Just like right now, we're not just going to press the sell button in crude. We're going to wait for the condition shifts and whatnot intraday. I like where we're at in these markets, and I like our plan. I feel good about it. Notice on the profile chart here, notice not once today have you heard me talk about crude oil prior value, right? Have you heard me once today say, well, we're inside prior value or whatnot? No, right? And I don't need to split the profile and get the value area and whatnot to tell me that. I see this value area, kind of, but you know what I really see? I see this and I see this. And that's why I've drawn these levels on the chart for us to emphasize that. Now, here's where NASDAQ, we start to get into the bear zone. Here's where I see a lot of traders say, well, we've got a delta divergence. Let me short here, let me start shorting everything that moves rather than waiting for the condition shift intraday, going rotational and then getting aggressive, fading upper extreme fades, right? And I see a lot of people get run over doing that. Prashant, are you talking are you talking to me? Are you talking to Madeira. Madeira. Because it could be an important question. If you're concerned about the monthly, yeah, so are you worried about the monthly bull zone in terms of shorting? We've discussed this. The monthly bull zone, we got like reverse image kind of situations in some markets. But anyway, so in crude, we've gone bearish, but we do have the monthly bull zone below. You're correct. But yes, it comes down to what Madeira just said, which is how much space do you have? Do you have any risk reward if we get the trade? So, well, if we're just going to plummet to it on this type of delta, it's going to be an easy conversation, but no trade. But if we hold the +2 here, if we get some kind of a weak pullback, and then we look at where our stop is, we look at where our entry that we're considering is, you know, and then we look at how much reward multiples of that risk we might have before we get to that monthly area, and which is, you know, the composite area and whatnot as well. You see it on the DMI, right? There's room, right? Imagine we get a little up rotation here, a little flaggy pattern. Let's draw it out. Let's say from here, we, you know, do something like this, right? And then boom, we get an entry. Risk, entry, 1R, you know, 2R, maybe 3R, 2.5 to 3R. You know, if we were to get something like that, that's plenty good. NASDAQ into developing value. So we're no longer, you know, stalking for imbalance pullbacks long. Almost got one here. Excuse me, almost got one here. But as I mentioned, I wanted more of a pullback on the 3-minute, you know, my main rhythm read. Didn't get it. Would have been nice. Would have been a nice little R multiple up into that. C'est la vie. Yes, it's so when I talk about a scalp, it means I'm against a narrative pretty much. That's usually what I mean. So when I'm against a narrative, I call it a scalp because I'm going to be shorter term. I'm going to exit quicker. I'm going to have really firm targets. I'm not trying to just hold a core position for a long time, right? It's a scalp. If tomorrow can be a super high volatility day, this week will be perfect as I kind of just think about what's been put out over the course of this week in terms of trading sessions. We had a couple days where it was like shooting fish in a barrel, right? Narrative, the trades that we took with the narratives, it all just worked out. We had a day yesterday where we had a little bit of both, little mixed bag. We got a little beat up early, caught a good one, slightly down on the session, but pretty, you know, pretty much a scratch day if you want to think of it like that. Today we're flirting with DLL. Nothing's gone right, you know. Narratives have been tricky in terms of how they've been shifting on us. when we have a read on a narrative and it shifts, that usually means that we'll have a couple trades in there where we tried to get involved with the narrative if it's set up on DVAs. Guess what? If the narrative is going to shift while we're trying to trade that narrative that's setting up, those are losses. So that's what happened today in both the markets that we tried to express those ideas in. And so we've got a DLL day, and then tomorrow, if we could get a really high volatile day and really crush it, that'd be the perfect week. CL trying to bounce, but it's like, ugh. I'm already thinking about the tape in the NASDAQ. You know, perhaps we could see within this bearish divergence, maybe a late rotation capitulation would be a nice little, let's blow it off. Let's run up through the CVA, up through the weekly DVA, and then start to fail, right? That would set up, you know, the most comfortable entry for us. I know people who run quantitative scans for this type of pattern. I don't usually trade it unless conditions are very volatile, but it's essentially, it's got to be at low of day, and then it's got to go sideways for a period of time. Right? When this occurs at low of day within, you know, let's say 5-10% of the day's range, right? You can create scans that find those kind of opportunities for you. It's not true. It's not very, very difficult to quantify those things and find them. I'm thinking about my potential review today. And I'm thinking that with the trades I was taking, at least in NASDAQ, there's the break of that little pattern in crude. No, I'm thinking in both of the areas that I was most active, and maybe here's some capitulatory type stuff in NASDAQ as well. What I was lacking was quite enough. Not that it was bad, but what I didn't have was a lot of really good confluence for my narratives from the trade locations I was taking, right? So long crude here, playing the weekly imbalance. Yes, it's within an overall bullish environment everywhere, but the only thing I really had to lean on was one reference, weekly development value, right? NASDAQ shorting early. I was leaning almost exclusively on the breakout pullback of the composite value. I had a little bit more, I guess. I had the overnight balance edge. I had the quarterly, which is a destination area, not really, a great area to lean on. So for each of the trade locations that I had today, early this morning, I didn't have, a lot of references stacked in there, a lot of things like, for example, think of the trades from like earlier in the week where we had a perfect level from the monthly, a perfect extreme fade from the week, a composite area, things like that, that all kind of stacked up to give the trade location. We don't always have that, right? I'm not saying that I shouldn't have taken the trades I took today. We'll get more into the review in the review session, but sometimes my mind gets a little ahead and I start thinking about that. And then I have to remind myself, we'll do the review. It's okay to, diffuse mode thinking in the background on like what you did today and what you could do better or what you didn't notice. But while you're trading, you want to bring yourself back to the task at hand. Don't stay in the past. You stay in the past, for a lot of people, that's going to lead to tilt and frustration and whatnot as well. So it's so cliche. I hate when I hear people talk about staying in the moment, just because of how overused that term has become and whatnot. But in trading, it's a really big deal. If you're doing something in the moment based on the past, like recency bias, your past couple losers, whatever, that's bad news. If you're doing something in the moment based on looking forward at the future and what you want to have happen or what should happen, that's also going to be bad. But if you're truly in the moment around what is, not what was, not what should be, not what you want to be, but what is unfolding with market generated information filtered through process, you know, on whole, you're going to make, much better decisions. Never going to be perfect. So we're seeing a ramp up in NASDAQ, a lot of buying, right? We'll see if it all falls apart and fails up here. If so, that'll present us with opportunity. If not, might call it a day. BRB. Okie doke. Crude with an RTH. Shorted some crude. Just going with the plan, right? What kind of a pullback could we potentially get in crude to see this thing through to our read on the destination for this move, which has not been achieved yet? Very easy for me here to get a nice risk reward multiple. Where are we compromised? Well, that would be, you know, on the 3-minute chart, rhythm and DVA, right? We're asking it to go fast trend against the 1.5 on ETH, aren't we? We're saying, please don't have a normal pullback all the way up. You know, I'm not really pleading for the market to do anything. That's always a bad mental way to be. But that's just, you know, if we're taking this trade here on RTH like we have, that's what's going to be required of ETH in order for it to succeed. Watching the delta, so we're considering scaling out, right? It's about time to do so. It's a little early, but we are in a little compromised position where we're at, you know, ETH and whatnot. Would love to see the delta really try something, at least show me that you can clear out some inventory, and let's use that for liquidity and timing. So here they start to press. We're into the -2, almost -2 RTH as well. It just makes a lot of sense. But I'd love to see delta show me the door. Don't like that. We just 1 or 2 ticked the low of day. No, we didn't. It's right at it. Yeah. So never mind. Disregard that. There's the delta push. If the buyers snap it back, we'll take the scale. If the sellers slam it, we'll take the scale. Either way, we're scaling. What's wrong? Are you a little gun shy here, Crude? Are you scared? All right, we scaled. Whatever. Got the -2s, you know. Didn't quite get the flush, you know, that I could see potentially coming there. All good. Let's see what the core position can do. Remember, it's what I call more of a scalp. So, you know, probably, you know, unless something crazy is unfolding and the sellers are just killing this thing, and we easily, you know, start to hold underneath some of those references very quickly and aggressively, you know, 8180s is probably the most I'm looking for here. 8190s, right? Let's just get into the zone and tip our hats and next. NASDAQ's not turning around. Looked like it might there for a little bit, but stabilizing and continuing with order flow behind it. So we'd have to see a major shift in what's going on in the NASDAQ for us to begin to stalk short there. So nothing to do there. Um, I see Gollum asked a couple of minutes ago if I was long crude. No, definitely not long crude. We're short crude. Am I not being clear enough, guys, on my trade calls? I'm pretty sure even like before I ever put on trades, I'm talking about what direction we're even stalking ideas in. We're only consider one direction at a time. But you guys let me know if I'm being confusing. I'll change the way I'm describing it or something. Cool, 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 cool. If you look at the S&P today, what's been offered there? I know we haven't been active in that market. Um, strong order flow, breaks delta neutral, imbalance pullback, which is a return pullback of the nice balanced distribution from yesterday. It's the upper edge of kind of that overnight. Again, yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly. Well, yearly, monthly, quarterly are kind of like non-factors. Weekly would be bearish from this area. So that's why no trade there. That's not a missed opportunity for me. Crude position really stalling out here. Anytime you kind of start to stall out like this with no aggressive order flow from one side really doing anything, the bars just getting tight and holding, you get the potential for some squirreliness. You get the potential for stop runs higher, stop runs lower. Everybody can be stopped out when you get people starting to position within just a pure sideways. That's the move right there. What just happened would be where I would have wanted to scale. In fact, we could take another little scale there, but you saw the delta just flush. It was right into the -2. That was what I was looking for. And now you see the reaction, how we're immediately moving away from there. To me, that was a little mild form of capitulatory that I like to look for to take really good scales at really good spots. Let's adjust our weekly development value area low drawing, just so our DMI chart's accurate. Guess what? That's the third confluent area down here. In fact, this circle's a little high. Why is the circle high? I guess it's not. Sorry. So anyways, let's make it wider. So not only is this pushing into the CVA high, not only is it pushing into monthly development value high, it's pushing into weekly, which I think I failed to mention thus far. Development low. most likely thing for crude here is to see some kind of a bounce, rhythm, ebb, flow. We've ebbed lower. It's time to flow a little higher. Not that I'm saying that it will happen and let's put a trade on because it should happen. It's just, you always want to think in terms of what's most probable here, Where are we within a small time frame, risk and reward as things ebb and flow? Where are we within a higher time frame? Now, the thing that we could begin to look for, similar to where we were like in NASDAQ earlier, it was let's try to find a long as we reach this bearish area, and then let's stalk short. It just hasn't set up, and we didn't get a long either. Crude, it's let's scalp short as we work towards a bullish area, and then let's keep in mind, let's potentially look for longs. Hey, it's a magnet, I tell you. Despite us still being down a little bit on the day, we're profitable in crude oil. But this has been a really good example of a lot of things. In fact, you know what? Let's save it. We're going to review all this. All right, where are we going to take more profits? Where are we going to do it? A little bit there. It's just going to peel out of a few of these. That was absorption, right? I think I just saw Delta go lower. Yeah, all right, we took some more off. Not sure. This went out of view and I was kind of watching those RTH candles. Either the scale changed somewhere, something changed. One thing you'll find you get really good at as a trader is you can see something out of the corner of your eye on a dome or something, and you know what that is. You know what just happened. But I might be wrong about this one. I thought I saw, it felt like Delta tried to push lower again, but I don't see it. Anyways. Okay. We're down to a small position here. Now we're right. I mean, heck, we're at 70. We're lower than I said we were going to hold. But remember, I said we could hold some if it's really aggressive. And I would call this aggressive. All right, I'm flat. Nice trade. So what's next? Monthly is giving a long trade opportunity, right? Weekly is now, we're back in the same picture we've been all week in crude. Monthly imbalance pullback, weekly lower extreme. Okay. So how about intraday giving us a setup? How about order flow? What do those things say? Time to be long? No. Right? We got to wait. We're either going to blow through here and we're going to go down our hypo list of lower and lower scenarios, right? And I'm fine having flattened out here. You know, this, as I said, more of a scalp. I know it's kind of aggressive into here, and we talked about maybe we could hold. I just decided, you know, based on the day we're having, I think made a little bit of an influence there, possibly. But everything I wanted to have happen here into the area has happened. So you know what? Let's pay ourselves. If this thing's really going to continue to get hot and go down, we'll find another trade, right? So short-term trading, you can always re-enter. That's a good question for the Q&A, Balance. Just perhaps pose it again there. We can talk about kind of my philosophy on scaling and whatnot, and how I generally approach it. It changes based on what type of trade it is and things like that. What's NASDAQ doing? I mean, not really tradable on the 3-minute, huh? The overnight gave more opportunity than RTH. We had a 2-bar pullback, which we passed on because it wasn't enough of a pullback. And we had another 2-bar, 3-bar stall here. Everything else has just been, it's, where's rhythm here? Well, it doesn't really exist. It's just, what was that, Merritt? Was that the noise for a long upward rhythm? Yes. Yes, it was. Super. Crude still going. Little stall there below the technical prior value area level, right? Technically, that's a little micro breakout pullback of prior value. Now, here's the question at hand. Would we want to short the return pullback of composite structure? Probably not. Yes, it's a return pullback into composite structure, but it's a poor place to get short on the monthly. It's a poor place to get short on the weekly. So I'm going to say too much dissonance there. It's not a good enough trade. GC, what are we cooking here? What are we cooking? I'm about to short gold, guys. Bearish, on weekly and monthly. Really nice little consolidating bear flag here. Almost like on the ETH chart, a time acceptance imbalance pullback. All right, we're short. I cannot see this gold chart when it's in DVA, in PVA on my long-term VWAP. So I've got to change this color scheme. Can't see it. I don't know. Let's use some limit orders. Okay. Got a little scale out there. Crude bouncing a bit. Well, that may be all we get from gold. We'll see if this little retest of both developing value area lows holds. I'm sure there's plenty of people like myself short gold right there on that price action pattern, you know, who'd be very happy to stop out just above here. And I'm one of them. We got a good scale though. Indices seeing a little bit of selling here. Remember, we need to see a lot change there for us to begin to stalk a short. Crude oil not bouncing. Not bouncing. I'm scratching the rest of my gold. I think it's just going to rip stops higher here. Crude is unhappy. All right, guys. I think that's good for the morning stream. It's been a very eventful one, very active. Made a little bit in crude, lost a little bit in NASDAQ. Made a tiny bit in gold. Not really anything to remark about. Anyways, great morning session. My goodness, we got a lot that happened, right? Changing narratives, difficult trades with reentries, just all kinds of things. So we'll have a lot to unpack as we do our end of day review and things like that. Cheers. Thanks for being here. We'll see y'all in a little bit for the Q&A session. I know there was a lot of questions I didn't get to, so we'll get to them.